Okay, now I was going to move on to talk about Traveller's Tales Jump to the PS2, just like I said at the end of part 2, but many of you in part 2 requested me to talk about one of their racing games, Muppet RaceMania. I checked it out, and I guess since it's made by Traveller's Tales, I'll talk about it. So please stop asking me about it. So from what I have played, Muppet RaceMania is your average kart racing game that uses similar themes from Mario Kart 64. However, unlike Mario Kart, this game has a variety of characters from the Muppet franchise, with a total of 25 characters with 25 vehicles. Speaking of which, you can choose whatever character you want and whatever vehicle you want them to drive in, which is really cool and what some Mario Kart clones lack. There are a total of 34 tracks in the game, and each and every one of them represent from past Muppet movies, like the Muppets Movie, Muppets Take Manhattan, the Muppets Christmas Carol, and so much more. The game also has a variety of game modes like the standard race mode, reverse race, where you can race in a mirrored version of the track, adventure mode, where you have to collect a certain number of collectibles, battle race, where you have to hit the other players, and many more. Extra characters can be unlocked by beating them in races or battles, or can be found in hidden parts of the tracks, and you can also unlock hidden clips from the Muppets movies. Just like in Sonic R, this game also has some really useful shortcuts that can only be accomplished if you're able to find them right. So overall, I guess I can see why many people wanted me to talk about this game. Even though it's not the best Mario Kart clone I've played, I do give it credit for its variety more than any other Mario Kart clone at the time. So now let's move along to talk about Traveller's Tales' jump to the PlayStation 2 and GameCube, their first game to those consoles and their first entry to the Crash Bandicoot series, Crash Bandicoot, The Wrath of Cortex. The plot begins with Uka Uka complaining to Cortex and his minions about their previous failures of defeating Crash Bandicoot. For a new plan to eliminate Crash, Cortex comes up with a new super weapon, aka a Super Bandicoot named Crunch Bandicoot. And for power sources, Uka Uka uses the powers of the elemental masks. Aku Aku hears all of this, and it is up to our heroes to stop Cortex once again and collect all 25 crystals. The gameplay basically takes the same formula from the previous Crash Bandicoot games and puts it into the realm of the PlayStation 2. You still have warp rooms that consist of 5 levels, and the main goal is still having to collect a power crystal and get from point A to point B. After that, you then go to fight the new character in the series, Crunch Bandicoot. By the way, he's not just the boss of the first level, he's pretty much the boss of every single other level, I mean seriously! But aside from that, you also still have the objectives of breaking all the boxes in each level to obtain a gem, finding different coloured gems in the levels, and going through time trials to collect a relic. Even though this game makes little to no changes to the gameplay from the previous games, it still has a different variety of vehicles like the ball form, the copter pack, the submarine, the jeep, and the aeroplane. Another thing is that Coco Bandicoot has become fully playable and doesn't always need a certain vehicle for her levels. However, her gameplay in this is really underwhelming because it is no different from Crash's gameplay. However, there are parts of her levels where she does ride a certain vehicle, like the snowboarding levels. When the game was released in 2001, well, it didn't do so good. The critics gave it okay reviews, but it sold very poorly during its release and therefore was a commercial flop. But it did at least do better than Spyro's jump to the PS2, and I'm sure we can all agree on that, can we? Now, I was going to talk about the next game on the list, Haven Call of the King. However, when I looked in my usual game store to find it, it was nowhere! Even in the PS library, I couldn't find a single copy of this game. You would be surprised on how extremely rare these games are. So instead, I'm going to skip this one out, and when I eventually do get to play it, I will make another part of the retrospective talking about games that I missed out by Traveller's Tales. So let's move on. So now let's move on to 2003, where Traveller's Tales released their final Disney/Pixar game, Finding Nemo, based on the 2003 Pixar movie of the same name. In this game, you take control of either Nemo, Marlin or Dory depending on the chapter of the game, and you pretty much go through 2.5D levels, solve puzzles, get from point A to point B, and yeah. However, the levels in this game also have a lot of objectives to complete. Ever wondered that when Traveller's Tales makes a Disney/movie based game, when they made A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2 and now this? Anyway, the objectives are basically swimming through rings, collecting a number of shells, winning a race, finding a hidden character, etc, etc. Completing these objectives will earn a golden star that unlocks more bonus content and secret clips from the movie. Playing as Nemo and Marlin, they are weak but they can fit through smaller spaces, and playing as Dory, she is strong but she can't fit through smaller spaces. To protect yourself, you need to find small blue fish called krills, and getting hit will lose all of them. The different kinds of levels in this game has are the normal objective levels, the racing levels, or swimming away from a big ass monster level. Even though this is not the hardest game Traveller's Tales has offered, this game is still heavily frustrating at times, and it can also get very repetitive in the missions. But let me talk about the worst thing Traveller's Tales added to this game. The puzzles are horrific! These are by far the most tedious puzzles I've ever experienced. There's no option to restart the puzzle, no hints, and it is so damn complicated. As a kid, this pissed the hell out of me. When the game was released, it only got average reviews from critics, and it was pretty much a flop. Because of the game's poor results, Traveller's Tales decided to stop making movie tie-in games to Disney and Pixar movies for good. In 2004, they released their second and final entry to the Crash Bandicoot franchise, Crash Twinsanity. It's about Dr. Cortex returning once again to destroy Crash, but fails as usual. After fighting each other out of a mine cave, they encounter a pair of mutated parrots that plan to destroy Insanity Island. Now Crash and Cortex have to work together to collect the power crystals, travel to the 10th dimension, and defeat the parrots. However, unlike the Wrath of Cortex, this game takes a more different approach to the Crash Bandicoot gameplay formula. Most of the levels in this game are now non-linear environments to explore, and some levels that still keep the point A to point B formula. This means that the main objective is now just going through the game without having to search for any collectibles to progress. Obtaining gems in this game is now finding them in hidden parts of the levels, and the crates serve no purpose in collecting them anymore. Crash still has the same moves he had before, like his signature spin and the old platformer moves, but he can now use Cortex as a weapon and use him as a hammer to smash stuff, or throw him across grabs to activate switches. There are times when Cortex is running scared, and you need to clear the obstacles in his path to reach to the next point safely. Cortex is also fully playable in this game, whose gameplay is like a third-person shooter, but he can't do the platformer moves like Crash can. Cortex's niece, Nina Cortex, is also a playable character, who can climb walls and swing across large gaps, and also has a spin attack like Crash does. There are also times when Crash rides Cortex like a snowboard, but this only happens in 2 levels. The game actually takes a more comedic route than the other Crash games because of its cartoonier feel and its slapstick humour. When it was released, it actually did pretty good. It sold a fair amount of copies during the sales, and some critics enjoyed the game, like GameSpot, IGN, Eurogamer, and Play Magazine. So you could tell that it did much better than the new Spyro game, Spyro A Hero's Tale, which came around the same time. Well, that's all there is to talk about Traveller's Tales on this part. Join me next time, and I'll talk about their games in the modern era.